everybody. Welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by Mr. John Harris, as always. And we are back to make our wild card weekend, or they're calling it a super wild card weekend, picks against the spread. So let's dive right into it. Before we do, though, watching on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe there. We're on, like I said, I say it every time, we're getting closer and closer to 1,000 subs. And then if you're listening via podcast mediums, rate, review, and such there, please. But anyhow, let's get into these playoff picks to update the standings. Like I mentioned last week, John went 9-7 in week 18, and I went 8-8. So John got one game back on me. So I'm only 2 games ahead of John. We were just talking about this, hovering right around the 500 mark still. I'm 135 and 134. But if you can do the math, John's 2 games behind, so he's 133 and 136. So this would be a big weekend, though, because obviously as time goes on, less games to pick, less ground to cover. But let's start with the games on Saturday. The first one to 3:30 Central Standard Time, or yeah, I think it's a 3:30 game. I forget if everything's in Eastern Time, but it's 3:30, I'm pretty sure, for Central Standard Time. And it is the San Francisco 49ers. They are at home. They are favored by 9.5, hosting the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, Niners won their division and such. So, John, who are you rolling with here? Basically, do you think the Niners can cover, or do you think Seattle can keep it close?
Before I make my pick, I just want to say, man, the playoffs are where the spreads get real tough, because the playoff atmosphere can just be different sometimes. Games can be close. And then other times it feels like that could be the case, and then some team just blows the other team out. And so the playoffs it feels so hard to really gauge. These picks are going to be tough, especially when we get to some of these lines a little bit later when things get impacted due to injury. But luckily for this game, for the most part, there hasn't been any significant injuries that have happened recently. So we know what the teams are going to be going into this one. And 9.5 is pretty big. I know that San Francisco's at home. I know they're probably the far more talented team, but something in me just feels like Seattle keeps this close. I don't think they win. I do think the Niners are going to not really struggle to get a victory here, but I could see maybe Seattle is down 10 late. They get in one of those situations where you kick the field goal to then try and set up an onside kick to get a touchdown drive, something like that, and maybe they backdoor cover here. So I'm going to pick the Seattle Seahawks. This might just be my belief in Pete Carroll. This might be me being impacted by doubting Pete Carroll and Mike Tomlin and some of these coaches before the season, and then they proved me wrong, and so maybe I'm overcompensating. I'm not sure. It might be maybe I because I'm not the biggest Brock Purdy believer, that maybe I think that there could be some mistakes that happen in this one that maybe keeps Seattle in the game. I'm not sure, but there's just a lot of different factors that makes me feel like Seattle is going to keep this one at least under double digits, and so I'm taking the Seattle Seahawks. I'm hoping that like tough divisional rivalry kind of a thing where those games get real scrappy, that could kick in for me, because I think that would bode well for my pick. But yeah, I think this is one of the more risky ones that I'm picking this week, but I'm going to take the Seahawks.
All righty. Well, I'm going with the 49ers. I think they win and cover. These two teams did meet in the regular season. Obviously, they're divisional opponents. An important caveat, too, this more helps John's side. Really tough to beat the same team 3 times in 1 year. Right now, San Francisco has won twice, so that is a little bit scary. But when I look back at those matchups, first one, week 2, was 27-7. So, and Jimmy G, I think it was still Trey Lance, I believe, actually. So tough. That one's not really a good barometer. But the one recently, was about a month ago. It was at Seattle. It was 21-13, but if you remember that game, too, it was really San Francisco in control the whole time. And then, literally Seattle scored the last 13 points. So I just feel like this offense is kind of rolling. They got Debo back this time, too. They didn't have him last time as well. They've kind of got this run game going. The traditional run game with McCaffrey and Jordan Mason's been a contributor, too. And we saw last time Kittle, did whatever he wanted. So I just feel like San Francisco, maybe a little motivated, missed out on the 1 seed. But they do have their guys back, although no Jimmy G, but their defense, fully healthy this time too. They've Javon Kinlaw seems to finally be back, as well as Eric Armstead, and we know Nick Bosa is probably going to be Defensive Player of the Year. So, as talented and as good as Seattle's been this year, I just feel like they're running to a juggernaut here against San Francisco. Like we've seen the previous 2 meetings this year. So I'm going with the 49ers. I think they win and cover. This Seattle's defense, it's well coached, but it's just tough to beat a well-rounded team like we've seen. It's tough for them to beat a well-rounded team with, and no offense to those guys, but just the youth and the lack of talent they have. And their offense is not really too creative either. So first disagreement right there for John and myself. Now we go to the Saturday night game, and it is between the LA Chargers. They are favored by 2.5, even though they're the 5th seed, going to Jacksonville. Jacksonville obviously won their division. So, John, Jacksonville, are you going with the home dogs, or you're going with Herbert and the gang? And for both these quarterbacks, their playoff debuts.
Yeah, this is people might feel a little differently because I know that there's been a lot of hype, at least about like the Cowboys game and the Buccaneers Monday, all that kind of stuff. But to me, this is the most interesting game of the entire wild card slate because, like you said, both these quarterbacks' first playoff appearance, the battle of the 2 great long-haired quarterbacks in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence obviously got some great hair. Herbert's got some underrated hair. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. 2 of the most talented guys in the league that are up and coming. I mean, this, obviously just the AFC is just so loaded with quarterback talent with Mahomes and Allen, and that's kind of become a rivalry that's developed. And who knows, maybe we start to see Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert start to get into that fray this year. But I'm going to go with the Chargers here. I know the Jaguars are at home, and they have been rolling to end the season here, but the Chargers, to me, I don't feel like their season has really been talked about enough for how impressive, honestly, it was. Like, I feel like they kind of have gone under the radar. Yes, they didn't meet the preseason expectations according to most. Like, I thought they'd be the 2nd seed. They would win the division. And who knows, maybe if they had stayed healthy, 2 different games go their way or something. We never know. But obviously they're a wild card team, but they won 10 games. And I still think that with all the things that happened this season, that's impressive to me. They lost Keenan Allen for quite a bit. They lost Mike Williams for quite a bit. Rashad Slater has been out for, I don't know, since like week 3 or something. They did just activate his 21-day practice window, but that could just be, hey, we're hoping that he recovers at some point during the playoffs and he can play. I actually haven't heard any reports that he's like ready to go by any means. So who knows if he even comes back, but he's been out for so long. Joey Bosa just recently came back. JC Jackson has been dealing with injuries throughout the entire year. Like, they've just been dealing with a lot. And still, despite all that, they managed to win 10 games. Some of them weren't pretty, like that one Denver game that I think was on a Monday or Thursday night. But they managed to do it. And I think that right now, they're as healthy as they've been since the start of the season. Like I said, Joey Bosa's back. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are both back, although Mike Williams is questionable. He's a game-time decision. But they said he's traveling with the team. I don't know. I think he might play. Shouldn't have played your starters last week, Brandon Staley, but that's another story. So I think that they're starting to get healthy, and I feel like their defense has sort of been on a hot streak to end the season. There have been some games they faltered a little bit, but for the most part, in the second half of the year, the defense has been really impressive, and we know how much talent they have on the offense. Austin Eckler's been doing crazy things. I just think that they have too many key pieces that are going to overwhelm Jacksonville here. And I don't know. I feel like with certain teams, although it's both of their first playoff appearances, I feel like the Jaguars, they need a couple more of those seasons to really prove themselves, get that experience of tough losses. I mean, think back to the way the Chargers lost last year against the Raiders. Sure, it wasn't an actual playoff game, but it sort of was, right? It was a win and get in scenario for both teams. And so I feel like they've had some of those heartbreaking moments, and I just feel like this is going to be the Chargers moment where they're going to step up. So I'm going to take the Los Angeles Chargers. I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah, that's who I'm taking.
All right. Well, I'm agreeing with you. I'm going with the Chargers also. These 2 teams did meet also early in the regular season, week 3.
Blowout.
Jacksonville won that one, yes. Which, one would think it'd lean towards Jacksonville, but it was at LA. I don't know. It's very. This is definitely, like you already alluded to, probably the closest, toughest game to evaluate and predict. But I'm more going with, like what you said, maybe the known commodity. I feel like, especially after that very tough blowout, Brandon Staley's probably got a lot to film to look at. They didn't have Keenan Allen for that game too, and he can be critical in the obviously in the past game. It hasn't been perfect, but they found, the past game's gotten better, and as the season's gone on, even though they've been dealing with injuries. Austin Eckler's gotten more involved. And I am interested to see, though, Jacksonville ran really effectively on the Chargers last time. Granted, it was with James Robinson. Obviously, we know Etienne's the better overall back, but it'll be interesting to see if the Chargers can slow down the run game. That's what really got them behind the 8 ball, and then Jacksonville, could do whatever they wanted because the Chargers were hamstrung. Do we put all the eggs and stop the run basket? Boom, Trevor Lawrence hits us over the top. So that's scary. But I'm just rolling with kind of what you said. I just have to imagine that the Chargers, maybe a little more desperate team here too. They kind of, I feel like both teams have been in playoff mode for a couple of weeks. It's a very interesting matchup nonetheless. And end of the day, I don't mean to be the quarterback comparison. I don't, sometimes I'm going with the quarterback I trust just a little bit more in Justin Herbert. I mentioned a couple times, mentioned last week, Trevor Lawrence in some critical situations hasn't, been on the money with throws at times this year. We've seen a couple games, so that's why I'm just really worried about. I wouldn't be shocked if Jacksonville pulls off the win here, especially since they are the home underdog. But yeah, I'm going with the Chargers. Sorry for my long-winded response too, but it is a very tough game to evaluate. But it will be a fun one to watch. I hope. Hopefully it's not another blowout like week 3. But anyhow, that is tied for our second small spread of the week. We'll get to the other one later. But those are the Saturday games. Now we go to the games on Sunday. We're starting off in the AFC East with Buffalo. It's going to be at Buffalo. The Bills are favored by 13.5, hosting the Miami Dolphins. No Tua for this game for the Dolphins. He's already been ruled out. Teddy Bridgewater listed as questionable. So very likely is going to be Skylar Thompson to be at quarterback again. It's probably why you see it's 13.5 point spread in the playoffs. John, do you think Miami can keep it close, or you think the Bills take care of business?
The quarterback situation, it's tough for me to pick Miami. I don't know. Skylar Thompson, I don't know. In the games that he's played, he hasn't really impressed me. The last time these two teams did play, Tua was playing, and it was a very close game. But at Buffalo, in the cold, also, I don't mean to, make light of the DeMar Hamlin stuff, but like that was kind of a week of rest almost, because they didn't play a full game, so maybe they're a little bit more well-rested than Miami, who has been clawing their way through the end of this season and just came out of an absolute war with the New York Jets last week. I don't know. I just worry about Miami's ability to score. I worry about their ability to keep up with a motivated Buffalo team. I think that we might see an added gear to Buffalo. I'm hoping at least, because we've been very critical of their run game. But to end the season, we've seen a couple of these games where James Cook has started to get more involved, where Devin Singletary is having some solid performances. And when you combine both of them, you're getting more of a run game. And so I think maybe because of the weather, it's going to be cold. You're not worried about like the Miami Dolphins offense being able to do what they really can live up to when they're fully healthy because of the quarterback situation. I think maybe Buffalo might want to run the ball a little bit more. And so I think they might just be able to exert their control over this game. The big spread does scare me, but overall, just considering what I saw last week against the Jets, I just worry about their ability to put points on the board. So I'm going to take the Buffalo Bills to win and cover despite the massive spread. Last week I got burned by the Eagles, but I got the Niners right, so who knows? I haven't had the greatest of luck with these big spreads, but I'm hoping that Buffalo can pull through.
All right, well, I'm more scared of the spread, and I'm going to respect it. I'm going with Miami. 13.5's a lot. Miami did have success in their last meeting with running the ball, and I'm hoping that's something that they stick with. Because we've seen this Buffalo Bills defense can be run on. It is a weakness of theirs is their size, especially without Von Miller. I am still too a little bit worried about Buffalo. Once again, this is regards to spread. I think Buffalo takes care of business offensively. They have Josh Allen there, but I'm just not sure their offense is at the domination level that we saw at times, a few times this year, but mostly last year. Really, especially this year before the bye. They just, like we've mentioned multiple times, they just haven't really had that same level of dominance. And I would imagine Miami dials back the aggressiveness, doesn't leave too many one-on-ones and easy opportunities for Josh Allen just to step back and make an amazing throw, right into his receiver's hip pocket. But nonetheless, I just think it's just tough to contain Josh Allen on that end. And on the flip side, it seems like too, on top of this recent struggle for them, I know they won last week, but teams have kind of, not say figured out their offense, but it seems like the league has caught on to some of the tricks, and especially without their main quarterback with Skylar Thompson. And I just don't imagine that Miami can expand on, have some counters to what teams are doing to them, and how, the certain areas that teams like to flood, especially the Bills. Bills love to play situational zones where, they kind of have a feel for where you're going to throw or where you're going to go with the ball. So, yeah, I'm hoping all this saying I'm going with Miami to keep it close, but I think Buffalo takes advantage and wins and carries on. Fortunate for Miami that all these injuries have piled up, but I mean, obviously we'll see what happens. I'm not going to pronounce them dead yet. So, third meeting between these two teams, although unlike the Seattle and San Fran, they split the two previous meetings, so there's no worried pressure about beating a team a third time. So
also, just random note, I believe the spread before the Tua news was official was around 9.5. So it just goes to show you like how big of a shift the spread has taken. 4 points, which in the betting world is pretty massive because of the injury. So just random fun fact.
Yeah. So yes, fortunate Tua will be out, so we'll see if Miami can find a way with Skylar Thompson likely to manufacture a win here. But anyhow, let's go over to the second game on Sunday. And this one could be a good one, although I don't know how many outside fans are rooting for either of these teams to go far. And it is the Minnesota Vikings. They are at home, favored by 3.5, hosting Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. Remember, Giants rested their starters, and then Minnesota kind of rested their guys in the second half, but they did play some last week. Anyhow, John, how do you foresee this one going? Do you think Minnesota takes care of business, or the Giants eke one out here too? By the way, just before I throw it to you, these two teams did play also in the regular season, so I'll pull that up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a close game too, like a 3 or 4 point game in the regular season. Which is where we land with this current spread. I'm going to go with Minnesota. I don't know. Maybe this is just my NFC East rival bias kind of kicking in, but I feel like, once again, my biggest concern with the Giants is always their ability to score. I know that with the Vikings, their defense is not very good, and I think the Giants scored 27 points when they played earlier, and so that's 24 points, which is...
Vikings won 27-24.
Yeah, Vikings scored 27. So the Giants scored 24, which is usually what I kind of say is about their cap. Like 24 points feels like where they can cap out. And I still feel that way. I don't know. I just think that the last time that they played, Daniel Jones wasn't great. I mean, he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. He did have the interception. Saquon Barkley had quite a bit of success. I don't know, Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, like they just had a lot of guys who stepped up that I think the Vikings the second go around should get a handle of. Also, the last time they played, they had zero answer for TJ Hawkinson. That was the big TJ Hawkinson game since they had traded for him, where he got 109 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson absolutely destroyed them. And so I have concerns about the Giants' ability to maintain that offensive success they had last time, and I just don't think the defense is going to be able to handle the weapons that the Vikings have. And that was even a game where Dalvin Cook had success, and he was not really featured whatsoever. Like, he had 64 rushing yards, but he's averaging 4.6 yards per carry. So if they wanted to, they really could have ran the ball down their throats, and they were clearly having a lot of success. But yeah, for the most part, I just feel a little bit better about the Vikings. Also, the last time they played, there was just certain stuff like the Giants, they went 3 of 11 on third down. They had some penalty issues. They lost a fumble. Just some of those things that they kicked themselves in the foot, and I feel like they just might do that again. I don't know. When it comes to teams in their first true game in the playoffs, I'm just not sure that the Giants, after all of these losing seasons, are quite ready for that playoff atmosphere. So I'm going to go with the Vikings.
All right. Well, I want to preface, I think the Vikings will win, but I think the Giants cover. I'm very worried about the Vikings defense. You already mentioned the Giants had, literally besides the turnovers, really did whatever they wanted to against Minnesota's defense. And I just feel like, this time they'll probably clean up the mistakes more. And I would imagine they will have answers to slow down TJ Hawkinson. And then, I would imagine I would hope that they double Justin Jefferson. It is scary, the Wink Martindale defense. While I like it, they are aggressive. Sometimes, once again, it's one of those defenses, they get too over aggressive, leave their guys on islands a little bit too much. Can't do that against Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. So that is scary, and that's what I could easily see why Minnesota wins. But yeah, I think the New York team, I think they don't mind playing with house money. They kind of been doing that all season, so I feel like the pressure is really on Minnesota. And for lack of a better phrase, I just think the Giants, both these teams have been notorious about playing close games. Even their game earlier this season came down to a Greg Joseph field goal as time expired for the Vikings to win. So I won't be shocked if it's a similar result where a field goal just determines this one. So I'm going with the Giants. It's one of those two. I just want to add, or like I said, like I just mentioned, I just don't foresee this game being a blowout. If so be it. It'd be the first time the Vikings really blew anybody out that wasn't the Bears last week. So we'll have to see. But another difference for John and I, we'll see if I can thread that needle or if the Giants just straight up win. Regardless, kind of glad these two teams are playing each other right away, so we can get them at least one of them out of the way, and then hopefully the next one can next week someone can take care of the winner here. But now we go to the Sunday night game, and it is another divisional battle. This one between the Cincinnati Bengals, obviously at Cincinnati. They are favored by 9.5, hosting the Baltimore Ravens. No Lamar Jackson for the Ravens. It's looking like, and I'm going to confirm if I'm pretty sure Tyler Huntley should be playing here. Anyhow, regardless, what are your thoughts on this game, John?
Pretty cut and dry. Unlike the other response, I'm going to have a pretty quick one. I'm going with the Bengals. I don't trust the Ravens offense whatsoever, whether it's Huntley, whether it's Anthony Brown, who played last week. I just don't really trust their offense to be able to compete with the Bengals offense. The Bengals defense has also quietly been putting together a really strong season. There's just too many concerns I have that I'm just not comfortable taking the Ravens, especially since we literally just saw what happened last week. Huntley's an upgrade, but I'm not confident that it's that much of an upgrade that we would really see that much of a different result. And if we did, I still believe that the Bengals have another gear in them that they could really turn it up if they needed to last week. But they didn't need to. So, yeah, I'm going with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I'm rolling with the Bengals also. It was 27-10, before Baltimore, literally last week, before Baltimore scored 2 field goals to kind of make it look close. But like you already alluded to, Baltimore offense, especially without Lamar, it is such a struggle for them to move the ball and just string together drives, really just find a rhythm or flow. Because they can kind of run the ball, but once again, no Lamar, he adds another element to the run game, just makes things easier for the line and more holes for the running back. And then, obviously we see the big difference in the pass game. Once again, for all those people that say Lamar Jackson can't drop back and pass, we're seeing that there's a stark difference between him and Tyler Huntley. And Tyler Huntley's no scrub, but you can see that this passing attack, not very creative, not very talented outside of Mark Andrews, who really hasn't, maybe teams have been doubling him, focusing on him, but he really, hasn't been popping as much recently too. So, I'm going with Cincinnati. I think their defense takes care of business on that end. And then although they are missing Alex Kappa and La'el Collins on their line, which is a little bit scary, we've seen Joe Burrow do more with less. And Baltimore's still one of those, it's a solid defense, but not amazing. So I anticipate there will be chances to hit Jamar Chase and T. Higgins deep, and Joe Burrow is on a roll. So we're both going Cincinnati to cover that 9.5 point spread. Now let's get to the Monday night game, which, once again, I think I already said this. I'm not very happy that there's a Monday night game. I don't know. It just throws me off because I feel like, are they going to play another Monday game? I don't know. It's just one less day for the winner of this game. But anyway, the teams that have been playing on Monday night are John's Dallas Cowboys. They are favored by 2.5, going to Tampa Bay to play Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. John, this has been a demon for your Dallas Cowboys the past 2 years. Do you think you can finally exercise those demons and win?
I think they can. The tough part is there's just the Cowboys. I feel like the second half of this year have been very inconsistent. We've seen they can drop 50. They could just have some terrible games like last week where they put up 6. And so I worry about the inconsistency for Dallas. Just some quick fire stats, because I think the seeding does matter a little bit. The Dallas Cowboys are 8-1 at home this year. When you contrast that to on the road, they are 4-4. Now, caveat with some of these road games, they lost to the Eagles when Cooper Rush was the quarterback on the road, so that's a little bit different. Last week against Washington, you could maybe make the argument it was meaningless, and so they just didn't have the same motivation they will this week. I don't know. Then there was the Jacksonville and Green Bay losses, which both went to overtime. So like those were close games, and you could hope that maybe they could flip those. Also, at least in the Jacksonville case, just kind of a freak interception off the hands of Noah Brown, led to the pick 6 at the end of the game. And at least in a lot of those games, they still did pretty well offensively, right? So like against Philadelphia, even when Cooper Rush put up 17, against Green Bay, they scored 28. Against Jacksonville, it was 34. Washington was pretty terrible. But in those games, you start to think, okay, so it was kind of the defense that let them down. This defense that has been so strong on the road, they didn't do too great. And so you're hoping against a team like Tom Brady's Bucks, who have not been super impressive, have had some games where it looks like their offense is just all out of whack. They don't have a run game sometimes. The offensive line is an issue. You're hoping that the defense can step up big time in this one. But overall, I don't know. I'm scared of the Cowboys' inconsistency. I still think that they can win this game, but I just have a feeling it's going to come down to some really tight finish. And for that reason, I am picking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to cover the 2.5-point spread. I might be threading the needle here because I do believe in my team. I guess I got to see it in the playoffs before I can really believe it, because for most of the beginning of the year, I felt real confident in this team. But the last handful of games, I think pretty much ever since that Packers loss in overtime, there's just been a lot of inconsistency. They'd have that high against the Vikings where they crush them, and then they'd have the low against, like the Jaguars, where they're out to a big lead and then they all of a sudden just crumble in the second half. So I don't know. Like I said, I think they can do it. But I'm threading the needle. Also of note, Tampa has beaten them the last 2 times they played. One was in Tampa, one was in Dallas. Now, those are a little different because they're both the first game of the year, so it's a little hard to measure up what a playoff game will be like. And I don't know, maybe it'll motivate Dallas that they've lost 2 times in a row. And like you said, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row, even if it is stretched over 2 different years. So maybe that motivates Dallas. But regardless, like I said, I'm threading the needle here, and I'm taking Tampa to cover.
All right, well, I'm going with the Dallas Cowboys. I think they win and cover. I just haven't seen enough out of this Tampa Bay offense to think that they can pose issues. And especially, your Dallas defense has had issues stopping the run. And in previous years, I would be very worried because we knew that was a very strong. That was a strength of Tampa, was their line and leaning on the power run game. But obviously, that's not the case this year. Been missing pieces on the offensive line. Leonard Fournette hasn't been the same guy the past 2 years. Hasn't been the same sledgehammer for them. And even the receiving game too, we've seen a little bit of a drop off there. So yeah, I think Dallas will. The defense will pose some issues for that, and I don't think they'll get completely run over. And on the other side, I think it's important to note too for Tampa's defense. Like once again, they had an elite run defense. It's obviously not. It's still solid, but not elite level. And I think if Dallas can stay patient with the run game, that will be key. And if Dak, this is the hugest thing. If Dak just doesn't make I don't know, you mentioned some of those interceptions aren't on him, but regardless, if the offense doesn't turn the ball over and just make things easy for the Buccaneers, get that offense some easy points, I think Dallas will be fine. But yeah, that does scare me, is just how turnover happy your offense has been, turnover prone the Dallas offense has been, because Tampa's found their only success really has in recent weeks has been because either they stick around till very late in the game and Brady can make a drive, or like against Carolina, especially. Offense didn't do much, but Carolina offense turned the ball over like 2 or 3 times. It just gave them golden opportunities to score and punch it in. So I would imagine, as much criticism as Mike McCarthy gets, and, he's definitely on the hot seat. Typically things like that, I would imagine in the playoffs for the Packers, usually we were pretty good about not having critical turnovers. I know we had some dumb moments like the, not getting the onside kick, but that's different. So,
and I will add too, I think Jerry Jones recently said that he has full faith in McCarthy, all that, blah, blah, blah. But I do think McCarthy deep down knows if they lose this game, he's out of a job. Like, there's just no way he could go 3 years with 0 playoff wins when he was brought into a team that was not in a rebuild. Like, you had your quarterback, you had an offensive line, you had a lot of stuff. And so, I that might motivate Mike McCarthy to come out here and fire on all cylinders. And so you never know. It could be a factor.
Yeah, so we will see. So, another disagreement for John and myself. Maybe John invoking the pod jinx or trying to thread the needle. But that's 4 differences for the both of us. So maybe John makes up ground this week, gets ahead of me, or maybe we just split down the middle and, end up back to square one. But anyhow, that'll do it for the picks. No locks. There's only 6 games. And unfortunately for John, I actually got my 2 locks last week. So I think I was at 9, I guess.
Yeah,
so it's pretty hard to come back.
I would have to basically lock
unless
almost
you really
every
go on a heater.
No,
which then you might as well just bet in real life. But anyway, so those are the picks against the spread.